Welcome to the Real Powerhouse Podcast. I'm your host, BJ Gramillion, and today we have Thomas DeMoss back at it again. This is take two. I felt so bad. He was one of the first ones to come to our office and try out our office studio that was not yet quite set up at all. And we got the recording back and my heart sunk. I was so sad because there was so much good content in that, so much so that I was like, look, if there's any way you can find it in your heart to do this with us again, man, I would seriously appreciate it because I just had such a fun time talking with them. So Thomas, welcome back, my man.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Yeah, it was fun the first time. Maybe it'll be fun the second time. We'll see.
Let's hope, man. Let's hope that we can repeat that magic in a bottle. I don't know. I'm sure that we will. Thomas is someone that, it's like we're cut from the same cloth. And so, he's someone that I can talk to and just pick right up, and just seems like, we think the same way in a lot of ways, and, a lot of same, values and those kind of things. So it's always fun, to get together. And this is a big reason why I love doing the podcast, just because, I get to talk to someone, that I really, enjoy talking with for whatever, 30, 40 minutes. And I get their attention for that time. Yeah. So I'm excited. But Thomas, you have a super cool story. And so, before the whole real estate career and all that stuff that we'll get into, what did you do before real estate? Tell us about your family and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, so my background is sales and marketing. Graduated I'm born and raised in Louisiana, and I'll specify North Louisiana because most people only know one city, which is New Orleans, and we're 5 hours from it. But grew up there, kind of a rural setting. Graduated from Louisiana Tech University, home of Terry Bradshaw and Karl Malone. You're a basketball guy, so I know you know who Karl Malone is. So
absolutely, the mailman. Come on.
Yep, but worked salesman. Worked at sales, and first job out of college, knocking on doors, selling office equipment, which is why Lee and I, our acquisition manager, get along so well because that was his job too. So.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so grew up, met my wife in Georgia. She was born and raised in Chattanooga, and just because of a matter of family circumstances, we moved to Chattanooga back in, I'm looking at my calendar here, back around 2004. And just, this has been home ever since.
I love it. That's awesome. So tell us about your kids.
So we have an interesting, history, background with our kids. When I mentioned this the last time too, I know you're a spiritual person. We're Christian. We're very faith-based, and for whatever reason, God didn't see it in His plan for us to be able to have kids the natural way. So we explored adoption, and we have 3 kids. They're all adopted. We have one that we got here from Chattanooga. He's actually our youngest. We found out about him when his birth mom was about 9 months pregnant, so had to kind of move quickly, but it all worked out. He is probably the most like me. My wife says he picks up a lot of my bad habits, so hopefully picks up some good ones. So he was our first and our youngest, and then shortly after that, God led us to Uganda, where we adopted Tabitha and Eli, who are biological brother and sister. Spent about a little over a month there in Uganda, going through the process. We actually brought Colin with us, our youngest. He was 3 at the time. It was a fun but a very tough experience to go through, and love it. Kids are challenging. We had one of those challenges last night. Middle school kids are tough. But we love them. They're great. We've seen tremendous growth through them, and I love the adoption story and being able to tell it. And so it's just been really fun. It really has.
That's so cool. And then remind me again, I know we talked about this last time, but the story behind, how did you end up with those 2? How did that work out?
Yeah. So the church where we go to now, our former youth director, they were not able to have children up until that time. And so they were looking to adoption as well. And we had a relationship with a gentleman who kind of worked in an orphanage over there, ran a school, really just an entrepreneurial mind, but was in the ministry. So our youth pastor and his wife decided they wanted to go to Uganda because of the relationships that we had. So we just prayed about it and said, "Hey, I think we feel led to do that." I was super nervous because it was going to be expensive. It cost us, I think it was about $40,000 for us to go over there.
Wow.
Fortunately, we had some awesome people at our church and family that donated a ton of money. And it's kind of one of those things, I just never missed it. Like, I mean, God provided the resources, the means, and everything, and so that's where we're at now. The interesting thing about that story is we went with about, oh gosh, there were 4 or 5 other couples that went with us. So in Chattanooga right now, there's probably about 10 kids that came from that orphanage. Um,
Hmm.
we found out after the fact that another family up on Lookout had adopted Tabitha's half brother. So
Wow.
we didn't know that,
That's
but Tabitha,
wild.
yeah, Tabitha and them, they're friends. They text. They've got a great relationship, and and even at our school where our kids go right now, there's 2 kids that were from that orphanage um, that they hang out with. So it's really neat. It's really neat.
Man, seriously, that's crazy. Like
Hmm.
such a small world, like
Yeah,
what on earth are the chances,
yeah,
statistically,
yeah. No,
of
it's
these
cool.
kids, in Uganda ending up in Chattanooga of all
Yeah,
places in the same school?
it's really cool.
Um, so wild, man. I love it. And then the age ranges right now, what are they again?
So Tabitha's our oldest. She's a sophomore in high school, and then we've got 2 boys that are in the 8th grade. So they're about 11 months apart, but we wanted to keep them the same grade just for simplicity.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool. And you guys did homeschooling for a while, and then this is
We
your
did
first year?
yeah, we did homeschooling for a while. They're in Christian school now. We're actually reconsidering the homeschool
Are you?
conversation. Yeah, it's just there was such an advantage. There's disadvantages. You don't have the resources, sports and things like that with homeschool. But from
Mhm.
a freedom of being an entrepreneur and the freedom that it gives you, we're I feel like I'm pretty involved with my kids. We speak in their life. My wife is super involved with them. Education piece. They're they work in our business, if you want to call that. I mean, I've had them cleaning out houses, and um, whenever my kids mow the yard now, I'm like, hey, I'm not paying you until you send me an invoice. So, it's not my job to remember
Love
to.
it. Do you
So
really?
I do, man. I'm like, because I mean, I do payables too, and it's just a one way for them to understand the accountability part. And they just send me. My daughter writes a sticky note of who does what. And actually, I just got through, filling out the little spreadsheet on them. And so yeah,
Dude, that is so
it's
cool. Good for you guys.
it
Training
works.
them
It
right.
works. So we try. But yeah,
Man,
they're
that's awesome.
fun.
And then now your wife, does she work with you in your business right now?
She has on occasion. She does a lot of the design stuff. She was doing some social media things for us at a time. She's got a human resources background, so whenever I have employment, challenges, I always bend her ear, and we want to make sure we're, following the rules. And but she's honestly, she takes care of our house and takes care of our kids and takes care of me, and that's a
Yep,
full-time job. So
absolutely. Yep, it's a thankless job that, man, we can't imagine life without.
you're right. You're absolutely right.
Man, that's cool. Okay, so then real estate. How did you get the bug?
Well, it was funny. I was listening to a podcast and somebody did mention Rich Dad Poor Dad, and they got praised for it. I
Yeah,
can't. Rich Dad Poor Dad. I think it was on yours too. Yeah, Rich
yeah,
Dad Poor Dad
yeah. It's
played it.
always amazing when they don't
Yeah.
reference the Purple
Oh
Bible.
man, it was a catalyst for me. But
Yeah.
growing up, we rented a few houses in college, and you kind of had that old crusty man who walked around getting the rent, and he looked like he didn't have a care in the world. And I started talking to a couple of them one day, and I'm like, you know what, that makes sense. And um, my father the one thing he did well was financial education. So instructed me about stocks. Wasn't the best stock picker, but the concepts of
Mhm.
investment in hard assets and things like that was always instilled in me. And um, I mentioned this before. I had a Schwab account back when I was, oh my gosh, like in high school. I've set up a Schwab account for our kids too. It never fails. I sit in my office doing stuff, and my kids will come in and go, "Can we see our Schwab account? Can we see how much money we have?" I'm like, "This is not the right time, but okay, I'll do it anyway." So,
Dude, that is a great idea. When did you
um,
set that up for them? At what age?
they probably had it for 2, 3 years now. And so,
That's
yeah,
good.
I've got them an investment account, and we just, I put them in some stocks, some pretty volatile stuff. But
Hmm.
they're young, so if it hits, it hits. Um, and trying to show them that. But talking through real estate, yeah, just the investment piece has always been a big deal.
How does that work? Like it, so I do they earn it like an allowance, or do they have to do chores and then you
They
take
do
some of that money and
chores.
you invest
Yeah,
it?
they do chores, and we pay them that. And so we basically, I kind of distribute it out. They've got a savings account, they've got an investment account, and then they have their cash. So
Uh-huh.
I'm trying to teach them early, how to drop everything in those buckets. It's worked out. They see it, and they kind of own it, and we're able to talk through what stocks mean, and how that works, the value of money. They see that their account is up, a couple $100 since it started, and they haven't done anything. It's just they just
Hmm.
put money in there, and the stocks have gone up. They paid dividends, things like that. And so trying to instill those early lessons that time is your best friend with money.
Hmm.
The more time you have, the more you put towards savings, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah. Man, that's such a good. Yeah. See, this is why I love talking to people on podcasts. I get ideas that I'm like, okay, I'm going to write that
Yeah.
down, and I'm
It's
totally doing it
super,
with my kids.
yeah, super simple, man. It's super simple.
And
So,
it becomes fun too. Like I can already tell, like my son James is really into like fantasy football, right? Like
yep,
he gets into that, or um, when it comes to like stocks, I can just see him being like, "Let me look at this. Like, how's it doing? Like, how am I doing day to day?" And then you can kind of
yep,
teach him the principles of patience and
yep.
not pulling funds and immediately
Right.
cashing in or whatever. So like in
It
real
takes a
time.
while. Yeah, it takes a while. My kids are my two boys. They're it's things that kind of frustrate me. But I remember back when I was my youngest, they're looking at Lamborghinis and Ferraris. And, look at that cool car, Dad. I want one of those when I grew up. I'm like, okay, I did the same thing. Then I figured out what money was really for.
Yep.
So those cars are cool, but I'd much rather be buying a house. So
Right.
yeah,
Right. There's the Instagram rich and then there's like the true wealth, right? And
absolutely.
that's another lesson that it's
Yeah,
great that they have you though to teach them that because I mean so few people actually do get that education. Like
you're
what is the difference?
Yeah, you're right. It pained me. I actually had to buy a new used truck this week. And I mean, I'm like, God, I really want to put that money down for a house.
That's so
Uh,
awesome.
I was just, but I enjoy it. My kids are super excited that daddy's got a new truck, but I'm like,
Yeah, right.
whatever.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, yeah. You don't get excited by that. So okay, back to your
yeah.
experience. So you obviously had awesome mentors, sounds like with your dad, to teach you the value of money. And then how did that translate I know you mentioned that gentleman that was collecting rent, I think in college, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we did it the simple way. Like I said, time was our best friend. I wish I would have done
Yeah.
more earlier, but I've actually pulled up my real estate history. We moved to Chattanooga in 2004. We bought our first house back in. I'm looking at here. It was in May, and then we bought our first rental property in September. I was
Mhm.
driving in the neighborhood close to us, and saw that for sale by owner sign. Kind of the classic story. Called the guy up. He was going through a divorce. And I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't even ask the right questions. He just like kind of, hey man, just pay me what I owe and you can have the house. And so that was our first foray into rental properties. It wasn't super complicated. We took out a HELOC on our personal house, bought this house, and then kind of just refinanced it after the fact. It was in our own personal name. I mean, we didn't have an LLC or anything like that, and we just kept doing that. I'm looking at it like I was 29 years old when that happened. I'm 48 now, so um,
Wow. And do you still own that property?
I still own that property. One of the biggest regrets that I have is our first house. We actually sold it when we traded in for kind of a nicer house downtown, and I wish I would have kept that first house. Um, it's just in most of our houses up until a few years ago were all in um, kind of the North Chattanooga area of town. So just a
Yeah.
really growing part of Chattanooga. And I mean, we've just been fortunate. The values of those properties have, I mean, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
they've gone up substantially. So we're pretty fortunate in that respect.
See, and that's such an awesome thing that I appreciate with you is the delayed gratification. Like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people don't understand or appreciate, or they don't have the self discipline,
Right.
to realize that hey, that instead of cashing in today, if I
Mm-hmm.
wait, just be patient with it, it will 10x,
Yeah.
and it'll just keep growing. And so it's funny, even before we jumped on the podcast, and this is I've heard you specifically say this more than anyone else that I do business with, because you guys wholesale homes to us. A lot of times we'll buy properties from you guys as well as others. Um, but you always are like, man, if I can find a way just to keep this one for myself so that I can, add to my portfolio, I'm going to figure out a way to do it. And if I can't, worst case, yeah, I'll go take a quick, profit on it, but you always factor that in. So how does that work? Do you have like a certain way that you go about investing each year? Like, I'm curious, like, how do you determine, if you're going to take the dollar now or if you're going to
Yeah.
postpone
So, that's a good question. When I got started, my whole background was in buy and hold. That's all we did because um, up until when I think I was 42, I was working a sales job. I got my real estate license back in 2016. So I was working a sales job, managing my own portfolio of single family properties, and then I did active real estate for 2 years. That was our focus. And then, I met up with a buddy of mine. We started Chattanooga Property Solutions, just not knowing what we didn't know. Things were easy back then, and
it?
and deals would come. Um, and we and me personally, I don't put any blame on anybody else but me. Kind of lost focus. The money was nice. I mean, wholesale fees are great. They're instant, and so we did take down a few properties at that time, less than what I would really want to. In retrospect, hindsight's 2020. But going back to you know, kind of give you a little bit of backstory through some crazy things that happened to my partner. We actually decided to kind of split. So I'm now the only owner of Chattanooga Property Solutions, and I've really kind of rethought and retooled things a little bit to go back to that buy and hold mentality. Um, to answer your question, and it's very complicated. If the asset makes sense, and I'm a geographic area, like if it's in a good area of town, that honestly, that's probably my number one. Um, and I know that's not the right way to do everything, but if it's in a good area, I'm going to crunch numbers and see how we can make that make sense. It's hard to make stuff make sense right now in the interest rate environment that we're in, but those rates are going to go down. Prices, valuations of houses are going to go up. The government can't stop inflation. They can just, maybe try to hold it at bay. I'm not sure that they're going to do well at that either. We're just in that market. And so to answer your question, yeah, what we try to do, I've got a criteria. We've got about 43 doors right now, a couple of duplexes, mostly AB class houses. I want to get to 50. That's kind of that number that I've got out there.
Mm-hmm.
We're close. Yeah, I think we'll get there next year, but that'll put me at a financial ability, kind of resource area that will make us be comfortable, and I think will sustain our family for years to come. That's the plan, and try to build a legacy of wealth for our kids, and hopefully they learn the stewardship aspect of it, and never sell.
Yeah.
So,
See, and I love actually that mentality because, Warren Buffett said, if you're not willing to own a stock for 10 years, don't
mm-hmm.
even think about owning it for 1 minute,
Yeah.
And I think about that with homes all the time. To your point, as long as you buy in the right area with the right school
Mm-hmm.
districts and all those kind of things, man, that stuff ages so well. It's like a
It
fine
does.
wine. It's like the longer you hold it, the more value that it's worth. And you
Yep.
just sit, just enjoy it, and it will pay itself off by using other people's
Right.
money, you know.
Right.
And so, no, I think that's actually a really
Yeah.
smart way about, you know, determining which ones you're going to keep and which ones you're not,
Yeah.
because the hardest thing is as a sales guy is to turn a deal down. And
Yeah.
so you guys are smart in the way that you're like, hey, look, I'm going to keep the ones that I really like in the right areas,
Mm-hmm.
but I can still make money just, you know, pawning them off to other schmucks like me, you know, wholesalers, you know, that, you know, will go ahead and buy that property.
Yeah.
And you can still make a profit on it. And so either which way you go, you know, you're still
Yeah.
making money on it. So I
Yeah.
think that's smart.
No,
Definitely.
I'll give you an example. We're building one right now. This will be the second house that we've built. We got our general contractor license a couple years ago as well. Actually, subbing this out because capacity is a problem, and it's in a great area. It's off of Eli Road, kind of the Hickson Chattanooga area. You just dirt like that you're not going to get it anymore. So
Hmm.
I am once again trying to figure out how we hold that property. It's not going to cash flow well. I'll have a ton of money into it, but it's going to be an incredible property that you just, when they say, God's not making any more dirt, it's not. It's a finite resource, and recognizing that and being able to hold on to it as much as you can is, I think, it's just immensely valuable.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I remember my father-in-law, and this was back in 2006, 2007, telling me about that time where, you know, his kids were
Mm,
getting older, and he was like, look, I was actually getting really concerned that my kids would no longer be able to buy or afford a home.
yeah,
And so it's interesting though, because then obviously the crash occurred, you know, everything became very affordable. But I'm realizing now it's more expensive for the first time in a long time,
yeah,
in over a decade. It is now more expensive to own than it is to rent.
yeah.
And so we're kind of back at that point where it's like, hey, you know, I don't know if it makes sense. So curious what your thoughts are on that. Like, where do you see the market heading? Do you see a correction coming, or what do you feel like is going to occur?
Man, that nobody knows. Everybody has opinions. I give you an anecdotal story. When my wife and I got married, um, she had some credit card debt, things like that, had student loan debt. Well, I told her, I'm like, hey, listen, let's start this the right way. Let's get this debt paid off. The student loan debt, I get that. We can handle that. So the only thing we got married, she had student loan debt. We just kind of been paying it. Well, the government froze that for 3 years. I literally couldn't pay it. Like I could not make a payment on it, even though I could afford to. I get
Hmm.
an email, yes, was it earlier in the week, and said, hey, we're reactivating those now.
Hmm.
So not only for me are those loans reactivated, but for everybody else that now owes student loan debt. Um, I just said, screw it. I'm gonna pay it. I was like $4,000. Like just pay it off. And I'm tired of dealing with it. Um, but we have the means to do that, and a lot of folks don't. And so they've been living their lifestyle without budgeting that in. And I read an article the other day. I mean, that could be $200 to $300 a month, and that's significant.
Hmm.
So that concerns me. It's one of the things that I look for now as we are vetting tenants is, do they have student loan debt, and is
Hmm.
can what is their household income, and you got to equate in that student loan debt to see if they meet your minimum, whatever your income ratios are. So it's something that we're looking at. I think it's going to affect us. To your point about it's cheaper now to rent than it is to own, I agree with you. I mean, interest rates have made it hard for people to buy houses, especially the millennials. People in their mid 30s to early 40s. It's really hard, and I think that's for folks like us who have those assets and continue to acquire them, it's going to be good.
Hmm.
It's just the way it is. It's the
Hmm.
I don't try to change the rules. I just play by the rules that were given. Um, but I do think it's going to be really, really hard for newer families to afford, because there's not affordable housing. The government can tout we're trying to do, even in Chattanooga, they're talking about raising money for affordable housing. they're not going to do anything about it. There's not.
Hmm.
It's just a political thing. So
Hmm.
it'll be an interesting landscape as we look forward. But I think the reality is, and I said this the other day, there is the new normal that we're in is now. Like, you know, you had all the other stuff we've been dealing with. COVID is just one of those things. Interest rates. It's just, don't expect everything to go back to the way it was, whatever that means, because there's always going to be something. So
Yeah. Yeah. And here's the thing, like you started investing in 2001, you said,
we did
or
our first house
later?
in 2004. So yeah,
2004. Sorry. Yeah.
yeah.
2004 is when you guys first started investing. And since 2004, have you guys been buying real estate ever since, all the way up till now?
Yep, yep.
So that, I think, right there is the whole lesson to be learned is, okay, doesn't matter if the market went up, if it went down, if it went sideways, you consistently were looking and finding good
Right.
deals that made sense. They cash flowed with interest rates at 8%, with interest rates at 2%, interest rates at 18%. It doesn't
Right.
matter. Like there's always going to be opportunity in any
Right.
market that you find yourself in. And so I think that's the point I like to drive home. Instead of these doomsdayers looking at the market and being like, what's going to happen next? I'm on the sideline waiting until it happens. Well, guess what? I think a lot of those guys have been on the sideline for about 5, 6 years.
Maybe
The
longer than
market's
that.
gone
There's
up,
yeah, yeah. There's some that
So,
just make a living off of that. So everything's going to go to hell in a handbasket. So that's just what they do.
yep. Yep. And that's it. Like the market will crash. Like we do know that it will crash. I don't know what's going to look like. And then it will come back up. And then it will go back down. And then it will
Yeah.
go back up. But in between that, you're looking at decade returns, not yearly returns. And
Right.
so because you look at the long game, your returns are probably, I would imagine your portfolio is probably increased, on a yearly average. I don't know if you have any idea. Do you have any idea? Do you track that, by the way? You're probably someone that would.
I do. I'll give you an example. The first house that we bought back in '04, we bought that house for $65,000.
Hmm.
We put money. We've had it for a while, so we've turned it a couple of times, but it's probably worth $250,000 right now.
Hmm.
It just is. The house next door sold for 205, and ours is a lot nicer than that. And so, yeah, I will give you. Here's something that I do use, a tool, Mint.com, which
Hmm.
is an Intuit product, QuickBooks, things like that. I mean, you can plug all your stuff in there, and if you really want to feel good about yourself or bad, depending on the day, you can see what your net worth is. And so, if you're keeping score and kind of want to see what's going on, you can log into that and see. I think it's a good tool to kind of track where you're at. Um, like you to answer your question about the valuation, I don't know exact percentage, but it's been substantial. And we paid, gosh, I was looking at, we have like 6 or 7 houses that are paid off, which I know is not like the greatest thing, especially when you could have borrowed money for 3%. But
Hmm.
it just is what it is.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Um,
you got to have some like feeling
yeah,
of like safety. You can't leverage the entire farm.
right.
At some point,
And
you got to take some chips off the table.
yep,
And,
yep,
and I think
good
that's where a lot of
point.
people go wrong is they just think that they can leverage everything forever.
Yeah.
But there will come a point where you're going to regret that. So,
That's a very valid point. I think doing the things conservatively, having a cash reserve that can meet your expenses, especially if you've got a decent portfolio of rental properties. I mean, things happen.
mhm.
You know this. I mean, people look at it and go, well, my mortgage is 800. I'm renting it for 1,000. I'm making $200. Well, no, not really. You've got to factor in vacancy expenses and things happen. But the
Mhm.
reality is, if you plan on keeping that property the long term, okay, maybe you just break even.
Mhm.
But the worst thing that happens is those folks are paying your mortgage off,
Yep.
and so you're increasing your equity and your debt pay down. And so um, you're kind of going back to playing by the rules. Those are the rules. Like,
Yeah.
this is the playing field that we've been given. Um, I'm not going to get into political argument whether it's right or wrong or good or bad. It just is what it is. And so we choose to play the game that we're in and try to do the best we can with stewardship and being generous.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. Okay, so typically as we get to kind of that 30-minute mark, we like to ask, three questions of
Okay.
everyone. And the first being, because originally this podcast it was titled Rush to Fail, and so we love to hear about people's failures, because I just feel like that's the fastest way to learn. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
listening to Elon Musk's book right now, and he is like maniacal about questioning everything, right? And
Yep.
he just and with him, he wants people to push the limit. Like
Mm-hmm.
you need to get to a point where you are failing, so that okay, like that's where the limit is, right? And so I can kind of scale back. Or he wants you to fail as quickly as possible, just so you can learn
Mm-hmm.
from it. And so it's funny, as I'm listening to his book, there's so many common traits, that I have with him. He's completely, obviously, I'm not going to say I'm anything like Elon Musk, because I'm not even close.
Yeah.
But in that regard, though, yeah, for sure. Like I love that he has that mentality of like he wants his employees to just embrace failure, because it
Right.
means they're pushing the limit. So I'm
Absolutely.
curious with you, in your career, is there something that, looking back on, that maybe was a big miscalculation, or something you had to learn the hard way?
Yeah, we talked about this before. I love Warren Buffett. My dad taught me who he was, and his first principle is don't lose money.
Yeah.
Don't lose money. Like that's it. And so that's kind of the way that we played. Super conservative. I'm not as risky as other folks, but so there's trade offs.
Mhm.
We could have grown substantially more. Um, but and you and I've talked about this. We've been kind of been in the wholesale business, flipping for about 5 years. We've never lost money on a deal. So, but how that relates to failure is, like you said, if you don't stretch outside of your comfort zone, you're not going to grow. And so I think I do kind of count that as a failure. Is we've got to look back, we've got to be introspective about who we are, where we're comfortable, continue to push the envelope. And I'll bring this back to, kind of a Christian ethics, if you will.
Mhm.
Stewardship is not laziness. God calls us to be more Christ-like, which means we continue to grow, we continue to evolve, we continue to get better. And that's one of those things. Living a life of comfort is good. I want to live a life of contentment, but comfort and kind of stretching ourselves is always um, the challenge and the goal. And so, I mentioned COVID before. COVID was one of those things, those periods of your life where there was like that monotony. We were doing a lot of, FaceTime, Skypes, and all that stuff. You kind of got comfortable. And I got comfortable for a couple of years being behind a desk and just kind of doing those things. And I just had to reevaluate, is that what I need to be doing in my business? Because we just got comfortable with those habits. And so that's something that I've had to really look and evaluate. Like, why am I still doing this? I loved going and talking to people. I loved going to look at houses. I mean, I mentioned to you before, we drove to Lafayette. Man, that's the cool part about what we do.
Mhm.
And I think we have to continue to realign and align ourselves with why we're doing what we're doing. Um,
Man,
and so
that
that's
hit
kind of,
home. And I appreciate you sharing that, because I've had that exact same thought all
yeah.
week. Where I'm like, what am I doing sitting behind this dang computer in my office? No idea
Yeah,
what's going on outside.
yeah. Uh,
And yeah, like you just get so content, because it's like,
it's
okay, I'm
easy.
finally at a spot where things are kind of,
Yeah,
working. And so then, yeah, you
yeah,
sit back and kind of relax a little bit. And that's when you get in trouble. Like that's when
yeah.
you start, because you can't help it. Either you're growing, or you're regressing. Like
Exactly.
that's the hardest thing for
Yep,
me to realize in life. And,
yep.
and I love that.
No,
Yeah.
it's. I tell you, I know you. I think you're gonna. I'll wait for your question, but you're probably gonna ask me about a book or a podcast, so I've got a good answer for
Yes,
that.
I am. You
So,
got, yep, one ahead. Go figure.
uh,
Yeah, what is
well,
that?
so books that have influenced me, podcasts. This is funny. I've got it. Actually, I mentioned this on before. This book, "Rigging the Game." There we
Yeah,
go. It's
yeah.
huge, man. "Rigging the Game" by Dan Nicholson, a book that I've read it. I've re-listened to it. It's given me the freedom to be content with what we've done. You and I both know in this real estate world, it's a very one up. You know,
Mhm.
if I know BJ's got 50 properties, well, I need 51. You know,
Yeah.
but I like that book because it digs down into why we're doing what we're doing, what gets us closer to what we actually want versus just having more of something else. That book's made a profound impact on me. I tell you another book, kind of a it's interesting. I just got through listening to David Goggins' book, Can't Hurt Me.
Oh
Um,
man, so
I,
good.
oh my gosh, it was painful to listen to it because of
Yeah.
what he did to his body,
Yeah.
and and I respect the achievements that he had. But one of the things that was going through my mind was, and I don't mean this in a bad way. I'd love to sit down and talk to the dude, but like the physical things, the military service, he's done things that most humans or any human will never do. But
Mm-mm.
in my mind, I'm thinking he's been divorced at least 3 times.
Yeah.
You know, his family life is not what it needs to be. And honestly, if I was sitting in a room going with him, man, I think you've done some crazy things, but I think you probably trade your life for mine if you saw how happy I was.
Yeah.
You know, it just like what are we really doing? What is this all for?
Mm.
Um, and I think that's a big deal. And like I said, I'm 48, so it's I'm still working on wisdom. It takes a while. So
Yeah. Let me know when you figured it all out.
yeah, it's every day, man, every day.
Man, that's such a good. It's so funny because yeah, like I said, we think very similar. And I saw one of his. I follow him on Instagram, I think, or
Yeah,
something, and he was on there, and the guy, I think he works with like the fire department or something. He's out there doing
he,
forest fires or something
yep,
just to
yep,
keep
that's what he
himself
does.
busy because he's just
Hmm.
like he just can't help but like do stuff. And so
Right.
like after an 18-hour day, they're out there doing like 500 push-ups and
Hmm.
100 pull-ups and I'm with you. I'm kind of like, look, it's almost like at what point, is it too much? Like,
Yeah,
what are you trying to accomplish? Because I think you've proved everything physically and mentally. Clearly,
hundred
we get it.
percent.
But yeah, like I wonder where his happiness is. Maybe he is incredibly happy, and we're all missing something. I don't
I
know.
hope so. I've seen folks like that. I just try to do 100 push-ups on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays as a supplement. So I'm not where there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're not doing 100 every hour.
Oh no, but I do think that is. I mean, go back to family. Families. It is cliche, but family is most important. Like your kids, we're not going to have them for long, and I want to make an impact on their lives. So when they leave, they still talk to me. You know, that was one of the things that I missed. My mom's incredible. We still have a relationship. My dad, he passed away a few years ago, but we just never had a great relationship.
Mm,
Um, my mom was always at sports. She'll call me. We can talk. It's just wonderful. I love my mom to death, and I want my kids to have that same relationship with both of their parents, and
yeah,
and, and I think that's important. And
yeah,
you bring them into your life in all aspects of it. They understand um,
yeah.
what we do. Hopefully, what we do for them.
No, and thinking about what you said, I'm just digging a little bit deeper. I almost wonder with David Goggins if it's like if you are not at peace sitting by yourself,
Mm,
in contemplation, just with your thoughts, just
yeah,
just on your own. Like, I wonder if he needs to be active because there's some unsettled thing going on that he just wants to be busy all the time.
yeah,
And I think maybe I find myself a lot of times when I'm the most miserable is when I'm constantly barraged. Like there's so many, like I'm constantly on a screen and I'm constantly
yep,
looking at things and I'm not aware of, I'm not being still, I guess, and
right.
being okay with like my thoughts and by myself. Cause that's who you are, I guess, at your core, when you
Hmm.
boil it all down, like, are you happy with yourself? I don't know.
Right.
Maybe there's something there. And to your point, I can obviously see that with you. And I think it comes obviously from your deep faith and with your family, because you can't supplement those things with anything
No.
else. It's empty
No.
calories, it's sugar, it's it's just not
Yeah,
the same.
it burns off and it goes away and it doesn't last. And so, yeah, I would say a spiritual concept or spiritual aspects, and that's something that I've, you know, has evolved in what we're doing. Just realizing, the shortness of life is super important, just to make an impact each and every. It's funny. The first in the year started again. Like, I knew it was the 1st of January. I knew it was the 2nd of January. Like, every day I was trying to make it. And obviously, as you progress into the year, the days just kind of run together. But it's
Yeah.
one of those things that I want to keep reminding myself of, like, every day is important. Every day is important.
Mm.
Yeah.
Do you do like a journal or anything like that, or do you have like weekly goals or anything like that?
I don't, because my handwriting is terrible.
Yeah.
And so I really despise writing. But
Yeah. I'm right
um,
there with you. And it's
yeah.
funny. I actually got an app. I'm going to look and see what it's called.
Mm.
Day One. Have you heard of this?
Uh-uh. Uh-uh.
So I drive obviously from Knoxville to Chattanooga. It's an hour and
Mm-hmm.
20 minutes. And so I have a lot of drive time. And so I got that app because I can record and it does voice to text, right? So it's like a
Oh,
journal that I can now, and really, again, I think I do it so I can put my thoughts somewhere, but then I'm
that would be nice.
hoping that at some point my kids actually want to know maybe what was going on,
Yeah,
my day to
yeah,
day. And so they'll have those recordings hopefully for posterity's sake. But that's just something that I finally, it clicked, and I was like, oh, there's got to be an app for that. So
I'm gonna look that up, because yeah, if I can talk and text, 100%. That's awesome.
yeah, yeah, it works for me at least. So hopefully I can be consistent with it. That's going to be the
Mhm.
next thing, right? So there's so many
Absolutely,
distractions, but
absolutely.
man, this has been fun. So yeah, I mean, the last question that I like to ask is, if you were able to go back, a decade from, or maybe at the beginning of your career, when you
Yeah,
started investing in real estate, is there something that you would do different?
I definitely hold more houses.
Right?
I would
That's
definitely
the
do
common
that.
answer with everyone in
Yeah.
real estate.
I would try to hold on to more. Um, like I said, I probably would have started early. I mean, I was 29, which is relatively young, but still, if you've got the means and the wherewithal,
Hmm.
um, I mean, you don't even have to buy a lot. If you start at 25 and you buy a couple of houses a year, that's huge. I mean,
Yeah.
so yeah, just going back to the value of time. I do a mistake in going back to that. I wish we did refinance a lot of our properties, a couple of years ago when rates were, 3.5%.
Yeah.
And looking back, I wish I would have done more. We have a pretty large amount of equity in those properties, but we still pulled out a bunch. It was free money. I
Yeah.
mean, it was free money. And that's one of the things, if we would have pulled out more, it would have given us a little bit more financial, I guess just having the cash on hand to hold assets now in a tighter interest rate environment. Um, so that's one of the things, be aware of the environment, always look to what's going on. Um, you know, history repeats itself. I mean, it cycles, it goes, especially financial stuff. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think again, going back, you're just consistent with it because the market will go up, it will go down, it will repeat
Yep,
itself. But the common thread has just been consistency in what
absolutely.
you're doing, and just that boring investor, those moves that
Yeah.
everyone yawns at and they don't think is exciting at all, it really does end up, you look at it 10 years down the road and you're like, holy smokes, like
Yep.
that's kind of wild.
Yep. It's
So
not
it's kind of,
sexy. It's not on Instagram. I am on
no.
Instagram, but it's just, yeah.
Exactly.
I'm
Right.
walking through
Yeah, you're
nasty
not posting
houses.
those checks right now. You're just sitting on a boring old investment property
Yeah, pretty
and
much.
just one
Pretty
after another.
much. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this has been a blast. I know you got vacation plans here pretty
Yep.
soon. You guys are heading out with the family, which I love. And so thanks for taking the time with us, Thomas.
It's been a pleasure, BJ. I thank you for having me back on.
Yeah, you bet. Appreciate it.
All right. See you, buddy.
Yeah.